guys, we're going to talk about briefly the philosophical system, if you will, like epistemology, which is theory of how knowledge is possible, behind the leftists, your cultural Marxists, as they call them, or critical theorists, or postmodernist type philosophies, because this is the philosophy that the left, these extreme leftists, use to justify political violence or any other kind of violence. This is how they, it's basically an admission that rationality is not an option for them. They can't, they can't actually be consistently rational according to their worldview, and so they abandon it altogether. It goes back to when, the problems of philosophy, we're talking about the problem of appearance versus the problem of reality, where there's a disconnect between our sense data and the material world. Well, they seize upon that and they say, okay, well, because there's this disconnect, you can't actually know objective reality, and some of them drift over into nihilism, and there is no reality other than the self, and so once you make that disconnect and you make your sense perception the foundation of your epistemology, this is where, biblically speaking, it breaks down. The foundation of our epistemology is the God of Scripture, the God that upholds all things by the word of His power, that made us in His image, and that obligates us and holds us responsible for our decisions and for our actions, because He's made us capable of discerning and understanding the world that we're in. But once you say, well, my sense perception is the foundation, and it's not provable to be accurately related to the material world, now suddenly the problem of appearance and reality is, the way things appear to you is one way, and the way that you interpret that could be anything, any scientific narrative, any fictional narrative. Like, there is no truth, and so any narrative that can sufficiently enough correspond to the points of data that you are interacting with can be, your interpretation, your truth, if you will. So it doesn't have to be real. It doesn't have to be objective fact, because they don't believe that that's even possible. So once you start there, and then you have, you can justify any number of realities or any number of fictions, if you will, onto and project those things onto the material world. It's just your imagination at that point, whatever philosophy, but once they establish that there's no absolute truth, and then they get into justifying that really what's going on is there's a power struggle. It's not a struggle for rationality or rational debate. It's a power struggle. And so rationality and debate is just simply a way to enslave people. In other words, rationality, science, logic is violence. It's a way for people to enslave other people. So when they look at you as providing rational argumentation, they interpret that as you trying to enslave them through some sleight of hand argument that doesn't correspond to the real world, because there is no correspondence to the real world. It's just a matter of dominance. It's a matter of the power of will. So you can see that as an epistemology, it's self-refuting, because if there's no absolute truth or no way to correspond to reality, then you can't say that this system corresponds to reality. And so what they do is that doesn't stop them. They continue to trudge on in their system, and since it's a matter of power struggles, they look at ideologies as a way to try to control people. So it becomes a power struggle. All relationships are power struggle, and all speech is violence. That what happens is, the strongest are the ones that are able to marshal the malcontents, if you will, and organize them and put them into a force that can impose their will. And again, they have no compunction about lying or violence or stealing or whatever means necessary, rewriting history. This is all part of what they would do. This is all, is justified by the fact that there's no reality. History is just like a meta-narrative that you're interpreting to help your current philosophy, or you can rewrite history. To them it doesn't matter, because there's no truth, and so it's just a matter of imposing will. So authoritarianism results, in this, and this is what they ultimately want, because they see that collectivism is where reality can be established. In other words, the individual has his identity in the group, in the culture, in the structure of society, if you will, the language and all these things. We find our identity within the collective. So they view things as regarding collective or class, and so it's a way for them to collectively impose their will onto others. And so once you disconnect it from reality, which again is self-refuting, and it's not the way they actually live. If they go to buy their weapons and their guns at the gun store and they get overcharged, they're going to complain as if mathematics is absolute and applies to this particular purchase. So they're inconsistent, because that type of ideology cannot be maintained. It's self-refuting. So you can see that it doesn't correspond to reality, because they deny the fact that objective reality is knowable, but then they operate as if it is. They act morally outraged about capitalism, when there can be no moral outrage, because they deny morality. So it's foolishness as far as that goes. That they deny science and as a reality. They deny logic as a reality. But anyway, I just want you to see that this is what you're dealing with. That this is why they think the way they think. This is why they act the way they act. And this is the way they will continue to act. You should expect this to persist. This is what's behind these cultural Marxists. This whole movement to silence speech, because they say, well, it's violence is really what it is, and so we're going to use violence to counter violence. And this is all you're going to get, because it's disconnected from rationality. It's not a system that can be sustained, and it's admittedly irrational by the proponents. So there's no point, even in their mind, there's no point even having a discussion with them, because all that's going on is you're trying to violently enslave them with your argumentation, with your reasoning. It attracts people because they don't have to be meticulously rational. It attracts them because they can throw off any moral constraints, and they can, it almost justifies their criminality and gives them this dopamine rush that they can be criminal, because they are like Nietzsche, Overman, or his Superman, if you will, that once God is dead, once there's no connection to any objective morality or any overarching hierarchical structure, you create your own. You do whatever you want to do. You are as gods, and this is why it's appealing to these people.